Good evening. My name is Justin, and on behalf of the Strand events team, I'd like to thank you all for being here tonight to welcome our two special guests. Ira Berkow has been a prominent sports journalist for years, with more than 25 reporting for the New York Times and contributing to such publications as Esquire and Chicago Magazine. His article, The Minority Quarterback, from the Times series How Race is Lived in America, won him the 2001 Pulitzer Prize. And more recently, he also penned the script for the 2010 documentary Jews in Baseball. As for our other illustrious guest tonight, Ed Kranepool is a former first baseman for the New York Mets. Joining them at just 17, 6 years junior to the next youngest player on the roster, he spent his entire major league career with the iconic team and played a key role in the 1969 Miracle Mets season, where they won their first World Series. So, tonight these gentlemen will be discussing Ira's new book, Summers at Shea, and their most cherished Mets memories. So without further ado, please welcome Ira Berkow and Ed Kranepool.
Well, as a reporter, I will ask some questions of Ed. And can you hear me? Is this working? We all knew, or most of us, I guess, here knew of Ed's wonderful major league career with the Mets, but we don't know what you're doing right now, Ed. What are you doing?
Well, not like the players of today. They retire and play golf or whatever. I've been working since I retired in 1980. I've been in the credit card processing business for the last 25 years, and I enjoy it. We go to work every day, and I'm in the real world. I see the real people, and we have a lot of fun doing so.
Do you ever get to see Mets games? Do you ever go?
On occasion, I go out, particularly when the weather is good. I'm not a bad weather fan, so early in the season, I tend to stay away. Even though I was there opening day, that's always exciting. I've seen them all since 1962. And I went one other night. I brought some clients of mine to the ballpark, but I get to about maybe a dozen games a year. We have some fun. I'm planning on going the end of May. My granddaughter, I guess it tells you how old you're getting. She's 16. She wants to bring her boyfriend to the ballpark, so that's going to be a fun night for me to see her. I'm a little jealous, that she now has a boyfriend.
Well, when you meet people and Ed Kranepool, the Mets, and the Stengel years, what are they most interested in?
Well, I think everybody wants to know about Casey, the real Casey, because what you saw on TV or at the ballpark on occasion, you saw a personality that was totally different from somebody that was, if Casey was here tonight, he'd talk like the rest of us, and you'd understand him, you'd have a good idea what he's saying, and he was a very bright, articulate guy. Once the cameras came on, or the writers got around him, they started asking him some questions. He started double talking, started talking about things 100 years ago, things that didn't make any sense, so you might as well just walk away. But being a young player under his tutelage was a lot of fun because he loved the young players. He wanted to see them produce. He wanted to see them do well. He was willing to give it his time. And even at, in the mid-70s, he was still the first guy at the ballpark, the last guy to leave, working with us. And he probably would have managed a couple more years if he didn't hurt himself up in West Point during an exhibition game. He fell down. He slipped in one of the concrete walks, and hurt himself.
You came up to the Mets. You were 17 years old, and you weren't old enough to drink.
You're right. I couldn't travel around with the players. It was tough.
Yeah, and you couldn't go into a bar with Casey.
No, Casey had the hotel bar. Yeah. That was all to himself. That was the one rule. The only rule he had was you couldn't drink in the hotel bar. That was for him and the press. But he was smart enough to know that he always sat at the corner. And I don't know whether you knew this, Ira. And he always had an eye on the elevator. Because when he was closing the bar, usually 2 o'clock, that might have been when our curfew was, he could see the elevator and he could tell who was coming and going. And I'll tell you what, they caught many a guy, just by sitting there.
He was always sober enough to catch you.
He was, I'll tell you what. And next morning, he'd be the first guy at the ballpark. It was amazing what he could do at his, the stamina that he had. And I enjoyed playing for him. He was great. He was not the buffoon that some people thought he was. He really, once the game started, you knew exactly where you
Well,
stood.
the first time I was around, I came to New York in '67, and he was then a consultant for the team.
Correct. He was gone by then.
And I remember standing at the batting cage, behind the batting cage, with a few other writers, and I think he was talking about playing the outfield. I don't remember exactly what it was, but in his Stangalese. But then suddenly, I started seeing how he was making sense.
Oh, yeah.
And you had to cut through some of this stuff, and he really opened my eyes to playing the outfield.
No question about it. When he wanted to tell you something, he got his point across. He worked on me in the outfield because I started out, obviously, when I signed as a first baseman, but we had so many older guys in the early years. They said, well, we've got to put you in the outfield, so I played some right field. But he'd take you in spring training. He went out to right field one day with me. This is funny, over at the Huggins Stengel Field. And he says, we're going to practice throws, and he's going to show me how to throw to the cutoff man. So he grabs the ball. Now, he must be 74, 75 years of age. I'm not that old now, and I'd probably do the same thing. But he picks the ball up to go throw it, and he hits himself right in the foot. He throws it straight down. You know, he says, well, there he goes. Keep the ball low. You know, I started laughing, you know, but I mean, that's the way I throw nowadays. I don't think I could throw out the first pitch. I wouldn't make it to home plate either.
You know, I was around Casey for a few years after that, 5 or 6 years. And there was one question I never asked him. I always wanted to. He always talked so glowingly of his wife, Edna. Right. He said that was the best catch he ever made. And I always wondered that in a romantic moment, would he whisper Stangalese into her ear?
They lasted together a lot of years. I guess, I don't know what he was whispering, but it worked. I got enough of my own problems.
Do you remember anything that he actually he taught you that you...
Well, I'll tell you what, he was great. I mean, he worked on base running, he worked on fielding, and he wanted to talk to you. He wanted to see all the young guys do well. I think it goes back, you know, from his days with the Yankees, where he saw Mickey and those guys come up. A lot of young players came up, and he saw them become stars, you know, so he had certain guys that he liked. He worked with myself, he worked with Cleon Jones, Buddy Harrelson came in just as Casey was leaving that last year. I think Buddy that was his first year.
65?
65, 66. Ronnie Sabota came up, you know, and he loved to be with the young guys, and he always had to sit by them. And I'll tell you what, you had to pay attention to him, because the one thing, if you went out on the field and gave your best effort, remember, the Mets had a bad ball club. As long as you gave 100% of what you had, he appreciated it. He fought for you. He got you more money from the ball club. No manager today does that. I mean, Casey would go to the front office and get you a couple of dollars extra for a raise. Our traveling secretary, one trip, overpaid us an extra $10 meal money, and he wanted to take it back from all the players, and Casey stood up and said, take it out of my pay. I mean, he was great for the players. He was a player's manager. As long as you produced, you know, fine. But you better pay attention to what he says, because if he tells you to do something and you don't, you know, you're in trouble. And that's how I got in trouble, really, in an article back in '63. Duke Schneider joined the ball club. And there was a negative article written about me one day because Casey had told me, we were in the Polo Grounds, the manager's office was dead center field, 480 feet away. And he said to me, you go out and get extra batting practice. I want you to hit every pitch to left field. Well, I was 18 years of age. When the manager tells you to do something, you're going to do it. So we took the coaches out, and they start pitching me, and I'm hitting the balls to left field. Inside pitches, which normally you would pull, hit it to right field, you're being a left-hander. But he said, hit everything to left field. And Casey said, I'm going to sit in the window here and watch you. Well, Duke Schneider didn't realize what was going on. He came out to the batter's box up there, and he's looking at me, and he's saying, Ed, you've got to pull those pitches. The pitch on the inside part of the plate, you better get the bat head out in front, pull the ball, hit it over the right field fence. And, you know, I'm paying attention to what the coaches are doing. They're throwing. I'm hitting the ball to left. He says, aren't you paying attention to me? So I told him to mind his own business, not to be disrespectful to Duke, but here I am, 18 years old, and knowing Casey's watching me, because he said to me, if I hit one ball to the right of second base, he's going to send me to the minors the next day. So, and here I am right caught in the middle. Duke Schneider telling me, a great player behind me, how to hit, and he was 100% correct in what he was saying. But meanwhile, with Casey in center field, do the other thing.
Well, why would Casey insist on you hitting your inside pitches to left field?
He wanted me to keep my head on the ball. See, what happens a lot of times with young players, and if you watch a game today, a guy has a tendency, if he's trying to hit home runs, to lift his head up, pulls his shoulder out, and pops the ball up or comes off the ball. The young fellow on the Mets right now, Ike Davis, he pulls off the ball all the time. He comes up off the ball. So you got to keep your head on the ball. You can't hit what you don't see. So that was an afternoon where I was taking batting practice, and of course, there were a couple of writers right near the batter's box, and they heard me tell Duke Schneider to mind his own business. Right away. Now they write an article the next day. How can an 18-year-old snot-nose tell a Hall of Famer like Duke Schneider to mind his business? And then right after the batting practice, we both walked to center field, because as a professional, you get over things. You have flare-ups in a few minutes. On the way to center field, I said, Duke, I just want you to know, I didn't mean anything personally, but I said, Casey sent me out there. He's watching me from center field and told me he was going to send me to the minor. Oh, I don't blame you then. I wouldn't try to pull the ball, but he says, you have to do that. I said, yeah, obviously I have to. I said, but not today, So we were very good friends, but of course when the article come out the next day, I heard about it from the press, and I heard about it from, the fans. Here this kid is talking about Duke Schneider.
Ed, you made the All-Star team. Was it more than one year?
1 year, 65, and I played for Gene Mark. He never put us in the ball game. There was 7 of us that never got to the game. Most frustrating thing we could ever have. You make the All-Star team, you go to Minneapolis, and you don't play. I never forgave him for that. And I'll tell you what, every time I played Philadelphia or Gene was with Montreal, whatever, I always had, in my own mind, I wanted to beat him a ball game. I wanted to show him up, because he used his players, not the other guys. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you what, when I retired, or I just left the game in 1979 after that season, Gene called me up to go to Minnesota. He was managing Minnesota in 1980. He said, we'd like you to come to Minnesota and finish out your career. I said, do me a favor, don't call me anymore.
Really?
I didn't want to go. New York was my home, and I played 18 years. There was no reason to go out to Minnesota, and especially for Gene Mark, who I really had a dislike for. I didn't want to play for him.
Yeah. There are levels of the game. You were remarkably 17, 18-year-old kid making the major leagues, which is incredible. And then you became an all-star at one point. But there are people like the Henry Aarons of the world, the Willie Mazes of the world. And so the levels of the game, what was so special? Were they just blessed? What was it? The hand-eye coordination, what made them so special?
That's what it was. They were just so special. They had such good hand-eye coordination that they never had trouble. Even though they did, though. If you remember, Willie Mays struggled. His first year up, he almost got sent out, or he might have got sent back out.
He was like over 24 or something.
Yeah, he struggled, but they got over it quickly, and just then, once they produced, they really produced. But none of them were 17. I came up at the wrong time. I signed with the right ball club. I wanted to get to the major leagues in a hurry. Little did I know, I got there 2 days after graduating high school. That's a little fast. Yeah. Opening night in Los Angeles, who do I face? Sandy Koufax is on the mound. He pitches a no-hitter, strikes out 15. I tell Casey, I'm going back to college. That's a tough way to break in.
Yeah.
But in the 60s, there were a lot of great pitchers. If you look at who's going into the Hall of Fame, it's all those guys in the 60s and the 70s. Yeah. And I played against them when I was 17, 18, 19, 20. This guy said they don't even get to the major leagues to the mid-20s. So I had 6-7 years in there struggling against those guys. Well, you know what? Physically, you're not mature enough to play against them. Mentally, you're not mature against. You have to develop in the major leagues. By the time I actually caught up with the league. I had been around so long, people thought, I was 100 years old by then.
But an interesting thing is you went down to the minor leagues in the mid-'70s.
Right.
Or was it mid-'70s?
Right. 71.
In 71.
70 or 71.
Yeah, and then you were there not for a very long time.
No, you had to go down and hit. It's just like what they're talking about to do with Ike Davis. When you don't play and you're not producing, mentally you just get yourself all screwed up. I had played some 8 years already, and they said, well, you're sitting on the bench, you're not playing, you really got rusty. Batting practice doesn't help you. And I couldn't hit anybody, really, at that point. So they said, you got to go to the minor leagues. Well, of course, it's frustrating as a player that had been in the league to go to the minor leagues.
And you were only, 25 years old?
That's right. I mean, that's difficult with Ike Davis,
Yeah.
because that can ruin some kids. Because the one thing you have to do if you get sent out, you got to go down and produce. Donald Grant, who was our president of the ball club, he said, Ed, go down there, do well. Because I was annoyed. I wanted the ball club to trade me. If they weren't going to play me, might as well. I knew I could play in the major leagues. He said, go down. We want you to stay in the organization. Go down and get your stroke. Well, I did. I mean, I was down there for 5 weeks and did very well and came back up. And then, of course, I produced for the next 10 years after that. But you have to go down and do something. Or you can get lost. Some guys will go down, not do well in the minor leagues, and never come back, because if you can't hit down there, there's no place to go but home.
So what would you, if they brought you in as a coach for Ike Davis right now, and when Ike Davis hits the ball, he hits it over the fence. But you see that if he's up 4 times, invariably he's going to strike out twice.
Right.
So, obviously the guy's got some talent.
Got a lot of talent.
So what do you're the coach now, and you're assigned only to Ike Davis. What do you do?
Well, I think the whole thing, a key to hitting is the mental approach to the game. First of all, you have to know strike zones. Your strike zone, there's a difference between a strike zone, because anything over the plate's a strike, but what's your hitting zone? You have to know what you're capable of doing. You can't go up with the attitude. Some of these guys on the Mets, and I read about it in the newspapers, they're worrying about taking a lot of pitches, getting deep into the count. Well, you know what? Unless you're looking for walks, and Ike Davis is not on this ball club to get base on balls. He's there to hit some home runs, drive in some runs. You got to be ready to be aggressive from the time you get into the batter's box.
From the first pitch.
From the first pitch. But know your strike zone. Know what your capabilities are, what you can hit. So mentally prepare yourself for the pitcher who's out there, knowing what he throws. But look for that pitch in an area that you can handle the ball. There's no sense of swinging at a pitch. It might be a strike low and outside. And that was my problem in the early years of my career. I had too good a set of eyes. It's funny to say that. I never struck out. But the bad thing is, if I swung at a bad pitch, I didn't strike out like Ike Davis is doing. I'd hit a weak ground ball to second base because I put the bat on the ball. Well, I would have rather missed some of those pitches than maybe when the pitcher made a mistake, I would capitalize on it. But he's got to go up to the plate mentally ready to hit and be aggressive and look for the pitch in his hitting zone. Okay, and if he has to take the first pitch or second pitch, that's okay. But at some point, when that pitcher makes that mistake in that hitting zone, you've got to really take a good swing at it and put it in play and not try to pull every pitch, because he's strong enough to hit the ball out in left field, dead center, and right field. Doesn't matter to him.
Yeah, well, they've moved him around in the batting order. He was batting 4th. Now he's, I think, 7th.
Yeah, but that shouldn't affect you, because if you hit the ball hard every time up, you're going to get some base hits. Where they put you in the lineup is just an excuse some of these guys made. The greatest hitter I ever saw play, who got the most out of his ability and never complained, was Pete Rose. I mean, he didn't care what happened around him. He had tremendous concentration. He had tunnel vision. Okay, so now he would think about his family could be in a fire. His kids could be dying in the hospital. He wanted to get 4 at-bats and get 4 hits. And then after the game, he tend to have something else, where some of us, including myself, you get 2 hits in a row, and all of a sudden that third time up, you wander. You say, "I had a pretty good night anyway," and you wander and you give up.
I remember Pete Rose's wife telling me, Carolyn, this first wife, his second wife was also Carol, I think. But his first wife said to me, "We'd have a terrible fight at home, and I'm shaking. I'm so upset." And he goes to the ballpark and he gets 4 for 5. Which annoyed me even more.
That's correct. I mean, no question about it. Nothing would bother him. Where I would tell my wife, and I still tell her, don't argue with me before the game, because I would be thinking about it, and that really screws up your concentration, and some guys affects it more. Baseball is a game of mental approach. Okay, every day is a different day. every at-bat, you got to forget about the last at-bat and concentrate on the current one. If you can do that and not get too many highs and too many lows, you're going to have a good year. You've got to just mellow out and take it for what it is. And you know what? You can't make up for that strikeout the last time. You better get the next time.
You know, you mentioned Pete Rose. Of course, we could talk for 3 days on Pete Rose.
Oh, yeah.
But there's one particular thing Pete Rose, and for example, also like Larry Bird. People have said, well, they weren't really natural athletes.
They weren't.
Well, but
played every position.
Yeah, but for them to do the things that they did, the extraordinary hand-eye coordination, maybe
tremendous.
they weren't good, fast runners, but who could shoot like Larry Bird? But, I mean, the thing is, there is a tremendous amount
concentration.
and there was a tremendous amount of natural ability going on in this.
Yep. Well, on Cincinnati, when I played against Cincinnati in the minor leagues, okay, they had much better players. Art Chansky was on that team. Tommy Helms was a shortstop. Perez was on the team in the minor leagues. They had natural athletes. But there was Pete Rose. He came up as a second baseman. He played third base, left field, right field, played every position, hit 300. Never complained. I mean, Cincinnati couldn't find a position for him, but you know what? He had 200 hits every year. He found a position for himself.
I think he's the only guy who started at 5 positions in All-Star games.
Probably right. And hit 200, got 200 base hits at every position.
If they put him at catcher, he probably would have made it.
He wouldn't have complained. Where you have plenty of guys when I played, you put me in a different position. I can't play. I can't do this. I can't do that. And you know what? My feeling was, put me in the lineup. And that's why I said I can play the outfield. I wasn't an outfielder. I was a first baseman. But you know what? I got 4 at-bats in right field. I played right field. I played left field. I got up to the plate. I didn't care. When it came to 7th inning, well, it's up to the manager to take me out for defense because I don't belong to be out there to begin with. And they moved me to first base. I mean, when Willie Mays joined the ball club, he played with us in 72 and 73, and they played him a little bit at first base. In the 7th inning, he'd throw me my glove and say, you go to first base. I'm not going out there. He didn't want to embarrass himself with the ball game on the line in the 8th and 9th inning. He knew enough not to go out, at first base, and that's basically what you should do.
A lot of people who've played with Willie say that he was the smartest player that they've ever played
He
with.
worked with the guys. He was great to have on our ball club. He worked with the young guys, talked baseball, but he was introverted. You had to go approach him. He wasn't going to approach you. He was in his locker. If you went over to his locker and wanted to talk baseball, he'd talk all day. And a lot of the great ones would do that. Mm-hmm. They would help you. I don't know about today. I think the current athletes today, when I go in the clubhouse, I don't know when you go in there, they've got computers in the clubhouse. They got computers in their locker.
They're all in the trainer's room.
Well, yeah.
We
weren't in the training room,
Yeah.
We had 1-year contracts. And if you didn't play, they got rid of you pretty quick. You didn't have a long-term contract, so they weren't going to, they released you.
What was the most you ever made?
I made $108,000. The minimum salary today is $500,000. Mm-hmm. Willie Mays was with us in 73, made $173,000. Hank Aaron made $400,000. The numbers today are unbelievable. It's monopoly money. I'd love to play. I'm just mad at my mother. She didn't wait another 30 years.
But look, if you could, how old are you now?
68.
68. Well, if you played when you were 17, don't you think maybe you could come back at 68? And,
if I took some steroids, maybe. I don't know. Better watch out. Be careful with that, though, Guys play longer, too, They're in great shape. Players today are in great shape.
This is off a little bit, but the steroid era. When you look at something, well, look, there's one example is Ryan Braun. Okay, now Ryan Braun was tested positive for steroids, and there's a and he was the MVP of the year. So now there's a technicality that he gets off on. Okay, he had a great year. Let's bad 320, hit 45 home runs, 140 RBIs.
Right.
The next year, was last year. They're watching every move he makes. He has an equally good year. Okay, so what do steroids mean if, in fact, he was doing steroids? And if you did steroids, how much better do you think you might have been?
I don't know. I've never taken them, so I don't know what the effect is. I mean, nobody in my era took them because they weren't available. Would we have taken them? it's tough to say. Probably if the rest of the league's taking them, I'd probably take them so I could compete.
Yeah.
I think there's different types of steroids. Some things, they're not going to make you stronger. You have to have good hand-eye coordination anyway.
Right.
But I think you bounce back better. I think, people that are sick and are on steroids, cancer people and everything else, after they take those steroids, they feel pretty good, like they could take on the world. And I think what happens in some of the sports, and baseball in particular, it's too long a season. Physically, players cannot play 162 games. The season is 180 days long. With all that travel, and you can't play every day and day and night and day and night. And it's really not fair to the fans because they don't know when their star players are going to have a night off. But you do need a night off. And if you had more days off, shorten the season a little bit, guys could get their rest properly. But now they play in California, they come back, we fly. Many times we flew all night, got into New York 4 o'clock and had a night game that night in New York. Well, you can't tell me I'm going to feel good when I get to the ballpark at 5 o'clock if I just woke up at 3 o'clock in the afternoon for, it's been a tough night. The pitcher went a day ahead of time, so he's waiting for you. And you know what? You're getting up there facing a guy that's throwing pretty hard. Your hand-eye coordination is not the same, so maybe they affect you there. I don't know. I've never taken them, so I can't tell you that, yes, it may be sharper or
well, apparently there is some advantage.
Got to be something. I mean, a lot of guys took them, and you know what? I will say this. We had a lot of strong guys in baseball. Very strong guys. Willie McCovey, Richie Allen, Stargell. I never saw balls hit as far as they were hitting them during that era. In the back at the Astrodome. Going to the Astrodome was the toughest place to play. You've been down there. You never saw balls hit in the back fences where that scoreboard was. And yet, in that steroid era, there were guys hitting them in the home run contests and stuff way up on that wall. I never saw balls hit that far. I couldn't hit a golf ball that far. So, something had to happen. Little guys were hitting home runs. Now, we knew something was going on as a player because every player can hit a home run if you get the bat head out and you pull the ball and hit it right. We're all strong enough to hit a home run. Hitting the ball the opposite way into the second deck is a little difficult. And those small guys were doing that. Now that tells me something's not right when they're doing something there. So it is affecting them. How much? And who knows if guys are still taking them? I don't know. The guys that take them always can figure out a way of taking something different. There's always something out there that these guys are taking. That HGH or whatever the growth hormone, there's no test for that.
Yeah.
They can't test for that. Everyone is producing growth hormone. You're producing it. I'm producing it. Not as much as I did when I was 25 years of age. So they don't know what your level should be. So how can they say what you're taking or what you're not taking?
There's various elements to try to improve your game. And Henry Aaron told me something. He said that when he was first came up, he was very nervous and he couldn't eat before a game. And so by the 6th or 7th inning, he had no energy anymore. And the trainer knew his problem and said, when you sit down to dinner, pregame meal, have a glass of sherry. That will increase your appetite. Now, whether this is only mental or real, Aaron said, I did that, and so every meal I had a glass of sherry, and I was able to eat, and I had energy going into the ninth inning.
And he had 750 home runs too, so something worked. I wish I would have knew that. You should have told me that when I was playing. Might have started to drink more. I don't know.
If I have a vote for the Hall of Fame, but if you had a vote for the Hall of Fame, would you vote for the Barry Bonds? Would you vote for some of these guys?
I think baseball's got a tough situation, and I don't think you can forget the era. But I think you ought to just say that's the steroid era, and just say you got whatever that 20-year period, and if the best players in that era, if he's a star for 20 years in that era, he should go in the Hall of Fame. And forget about it, because nobody was proven that they did take it. Right. They have their accusations that he took them, this, took that. Nobody knows for sure. Nobody really has proof. So how can you say Barry Bonds won 3 MVPs with Pittsburgh, was a great player, Now, obviously something...
Before he was a home run hitter.
Correct.
Right.
Then obviously something happened to him. He did get bigger and stronger or whatever. His head grew and everything else, which is unusual if you're just lifting weights.
Couldn't find a cap to fit on his head.
But, I mean, he was a great player anyway.
Yeah.
So he won 7 MVPs and Clemens and all that. It's tough to say all those guys don't belong in there. They were the greatest during an era. It's tough if you had a vote. I mean...
Well, I vote for them all.
Yeah,
I vote
because,
for them all.
I mean, when you look at their records, you know, they were great. I just say it was the steroid era. The commissioner of baseball knew exactly what was going on.
Yeah.
He turned his head, and now he comes up out of the sand, and now he's blaming the players. Well, you know what? He kind of let them get away with all that sort of stuff. When guys were hitting 30 home runs, 40 home runs, and all of a sudden they were hitting 60, 70. It took Roger Maris all those years before he hit 61.
Sammy Sosa.
Sosa, McGuire, all those guys.
Yeah.
Well, you knew it brought the fans back after that last big strike.
Yeah.
And he just said, well, whatever happens, happens. And guys were going rampant with those things. So if you allow them to take them, then you can't say you can't vote for him in the Hall of Fame. Now, the only guy, you know, and I think at some point I hope you vote him in, Pete Rose, I think, should get in the Hall of Fame. But I think I would put an asterisk in there. He's not allowed to be associated with baseball in any kind of position from a management situation or a front office situation, because to me, he's a detriment to the game at that point, because he knew what gambling was all about. But he didn't gamble when he was playing. His record stands for itself. He had 4,000 hits or whatever. Go in the Hall of Fame, but now just say, Pete, you're not allowed to associate in baseball, because there's no place in our sport for gambling. That mark comes up there. Everybody in the in the ballpark knows about the gambling. The rules are up there. You know, don't bet on baseball.
Right. Well, I agree completely. And my contention about Pete Rose, I feel he should be in the Hall of Fame without question. And the reason that when the Dow did this report and did all this investigation about him gambling, there's not a scintilla of evidence, as you said, that he gambled as a player, nor as a player manager. So he's not going in as a manager. He's simply going in as a player.
Right.
So if there's no evidence that he gambled as a player or player manager, then he have to vote on him as a player. Period.
Well, I agree.
And I also, and I also think that since he did gamble in uniform, that he shouldn't be allowed to have a job in the front office. Yeah.
An association with baseball, because I think that's really taints it.
Yeah.
So that's where I take a stand with Pete. He played. He was great competitor. Put him in the Hall of Fame as a player, and put that asterisk, and keep him away from the game, and that will take something away from him. He never apologized. Pete had such an ego. If he would have said, I'm sorry for what I did, this is a forgiving country, they would have forgot him in 6 months. They would elect him into a Hall of Fame. You know that.
Yeah.
I mean, he never admitted that he had a gambling problem. He had a gambling problem from 1962 on. We had nothing to do in spring training in St. Petersburg. He played in Tampa. The only thing that we did at nighttime, we went to the dog track, right between St. Pete and Tampa. Every night he was there along with us. We were all there. We would be at the $2 Quinella window. He was always betting the $10 window, whatever. He would bet on cockroaches on the street. He didn't care. He went every night. He loved the horses. He loved that. But you know what? So he had a sickness. So say he got a sickness. That's all.
He's always fun to be around. I mean, he gave you just, you ask him one question and he fills up your notebook. But before games, I would sit in the dugout with him, as others did, and like the Final Four's coming up, the NCAA. He knew all this stuff. He knew stuff about every sport, and you just thought, my God, what a brilliant mind he has. No one imagined that he might be gambling. He was probably gambling on all these other sports as well, but I think he stayed away from gambling on baseball as a player.
I don't know. I don't know about that. I think some of his players got annoyed with him, because they were defending him at that point. Because I'll tell you one thing, he'd never bet against his team to lose, or I don't think he would ever play the game to lose.
Yeah.
That wasn't in his makeup. He wanted to win at all cost. I think he was overzealous at time. He hurt players, sliding into him. Fossey at home plate in the All-Star game. He ruined his career. Running into Buddy Harrelson was a joke. I was in left field. It was Buddy's fault for the simple reason that Buddy fell asleep. We had a double play situation. He got the ball at second base. Pete Rose was the runner. He threw the ball. He flipped it to first base. Easy play. Pete was out by 30 feet at second base, and Buddy stood on the base. And I'm in left field, and I'm saying, Buddy, move off. Here comes Pete. Pete ran right into him. No reason for it because the ball had already passed him and went to first base. Because you see, you're not breaking up a play. He wanted to show him up and excite his own team because they were frustrated in the playoffs. But Buddy, if he moved away, Buddy, he couldn't have ran into him. It wouldn't have been. It wasn't a fight. Yeah. The one guy's 210 pounds. Buddy was 150 pounds. Soaking wet.
Right.
So.
Before we open up to some questions, just about pitchers you faced. I think people are always interested in the toughest guys, and they were all tough. I mean, they're major league pitchers.
Right.
But anybody was unhittable for you?
Yeah, I'll tell you what. The guy that was the toughest for me, and I'm glad that when I got in the league, he was an old man, was Curt Simmons.
Oh.
Curt Simmons was a herky-jerky lefty, okay, and he never picked up the ball. He struck, like I said earlier in the day, I never struck out. He struck me out the first 8 times I got up. I don't think I hit the ball. Never fouled the ball off. Now, we go into St. Louis. Okay, and Casey calls me into the clubhouse.
This is what year? When was this?
Oh, this was 1964, I think. He calls me in, Casey, and says, Ed, you don't feel too good today, do you? I said, I didn't know what he's talking about. I was 64, I think I was 19 years of age. I feel great, Casey. What are you talking about? Meanwhile, he saw the lineup. Curt Simmons was pitching that night. So he's telling me I don't feel well. And I said, no, I feel great. Don't worry about it. What's the matter? So he says, well, Simmons is pitching. Oh, I said, okay, well, I said, no, I feel all right, though. So he says, you sure you want to play? He was going to give me an out. So I said, no, I'll get in. So the first time I get up, swing at the first pitch, miss. Everybody starts laughing. Oh, the next pitch, I fouled the pitch off. Then I hit a 3-run home run. And I got a couple hits later on, but he was the toughest guy for me because I couldn't pick up the ball. It was really difficult. But over the long career that I had, the toughest guy was Phil Niekro. When you have a round ball and a round bat, and you got to hit it square, and it's bouncing up and down at 60 miles an hour, you know what? I couldn't put the ball in play. And he would never throw me anything. And he did other players anything but a knuckleball. Because, it all depends on the team you're on, the position of your lineup. If he walked me, he didn't care. So he figures, I'll throw you knuckleballs, and you can't hit him anyway. And if you're going to swing at him, and I wanted to swing, I was striking out, making out, whatever. And he wouldn't throw me a fastball, where sometimes on occasion another guy he'd get behind, he'd throw him a fastball and they get a base hit and they forget Phil Niekro was on the mound. But I never saw a fastball in 18 years against Phil Niekro. Wow. He tried everything.
Well, what about the Koufaxes, the Gibsons?
Koufax was great. He was the best pitcher for 7 years, but from a left-hander standpoint, he had great control. You could pick up the ball. And his curveball was his out pitch to the right-handers. But for a left-hander, it stood up in your eyes. And you throw a ball up in my eyes, I'm going to swing at it. And most of the time, I'm going to hit it. He was not comfortable to go up there because obviously the results, you say you're not making a living off Sandy Koufax. He was great, but he was not troublesome. Bob Veal at Pittsburgh, who sidearmed you at 6'9", that was a little bit more nastier than Sandy Koufax. Gibson was the greatest competitor of any pitcher because he would challenge you, here it comes, hit it if you can, and if you hit it, you hit it. But you better not dance around the field like the current players do. Because I know Bob Gibson, in his own mind, he worked so quick, if by the time you got around third base, you were still dancing, he'd be throwing the next pitch. He'd liable to hit you with that pitch. He'd put you in your place. So you hit a home run off him, just run around the bases and sit down. Don't do a show.
I covered the 68 World Series when he struck out 17 Tigers. And watching from the press box, they looked, every batter coming up, you had the feeling they knew they weren't going to hit the ball, and they were like little leaguers against him. I mean, and he struck out 17. It was amazing performance.
Yeah, but if you look at the performance, and I watched that game on TV, he was challenging those guys, and you knew it was coming.
Yeah.
You knew that fastball was going to come, and you know what? You couldn't hit it. The ball would rise. And sometimes these scientists would tell you the ball doesn't curve and it doesn't move and all this other stuff. But I'll tell you, those guys that throw that hard, Koufax, Gibson, that ball rises. You can't hit that high fastball. You can't get your top hand over and get that bat head going and make contact. It's just impossible. And he didn't care. The greatest feat I ever saw was Bob Gibson. 1964, the series went down. The pennant went down to the last weekend of the year. The Mets were playing the St. Louis Cardinals. Now, they thought they had it locked. They said, they're playing the last place Mets. They're going to win the pennant there, where the other clubs were fighting it out, Cincinnati, Philadelphia, whatever. The first night, Friday night, Bob Gibson pitches. We beat him 1-0. I get a base hit to beat him. The second day, I forget who pitched for them, we beat the Cardinals 14-5. Check the records. Okay, now they're going down to the last day of the year. Everybody's tied or whatever. The records were tied. We start the game. Casey had only brought half a team to St. Louis because our ball club was saving money. They figured it was ending the season. They were going home. He was letting guys off. We start the game. We're leading the game, the third game of the series. Remember, the Cardinals thought they were going to run through us. Gibson warms up, I think, in the third inning. After pitching 9 innings of 1-0 ball game on Friday, comes in the game in about the 4th inning and pitches the last 6 innings and beats us on Sunday. Because once he came out of the bullpen, the team got a little pep rally, and of course, our ball club didn't have a whole lot anyway. We fell apart, and they won the pennant the last day of the year against the Mets. But he pitched Friday night, 9 innings, Sunday, another 6. And was throwing as hard on Sunday as he was on Friday night. Today they don't do that. They go 6 innings, 5 innings, and they think it's a great ball game. They come out of the game and talk about how well they pitched.
Speaking of pitchers, the last thing, Seaver, your views on Seaver. What was it like playing behind him?
We had a great staff. I mean, so good that Nolan Ryan couldn't pitch in our staff.
Yeah.
I mean, we had Kuzman, Seaver, Gary Gentry. Seaver was a great, great competitor. Always in the ball game. You knew when you went out on the field, you were going to be there. He was going to be there at the end. He was giving it his best shot. He threw great. He had strikes. He threw strikes, sinker balls, threw 95 miles an hour. Great competitor and great person. And he hasn't been feeling well this year.
He had Lyme disease.
Yeah, he had Lyme disease. They finally found it, fortunately for himself. But he wasn't doing well for a while, but great, great competitor. We had great guys on the field. We had a team that grew up together. They don't do that anymore because of the free agency.
Yeah.
But remember, all our guys, when we won the pennant, were around 25 years of age. We had Sabota, and he's the same age as myself. Sabota, Buddy Harrelson was a couple months older than us. Seaver's the same age. Cleon Jones was 2 years older. Kuzman.
Clendenin.
Tug McGraw.
Yeah.
Tug McGraw was the same age. Well, these were all guys that came out of our farm system. Then we had older guys that filled in, Eddie Charles and Clendenin from other ball clubs. But the nucleus of the Mets farm system had developed together. All the kids came up together. And Nolan Ryan, there was a kid that had the greatest arm of anybody and could throw the ball harder than anybody. But the way they used him in a rotation could never develop in New York. I mean, we knew he could throw 100 miles an hour, but when you pitched him every 10 days, he had no control. So you know what? He didn't get a chance to pitch. And then he went somewhere else in a terrible trade, and we gave him up, and he becomes a Hall of Famer.
Fregosi.
We gave up 4 guys for Fregosi.
4 guys? I don't remember that.
Nolan Ryan, Stanton, the catcher. There was 2 other guys in that trade. We gave up 4 players for Jim Fregosi, and Jimmy was over the hill when he got here to New York. But Nolan Ryan, we made a lot of bad trades.
So whatever happened to Nolan Ryan?
He got lucky about 7 times that I know. I mean, he pitched 7 no-hitters or something like that. I mean, he still threw 100 miles an hour when he retired, you know,
Like at 45 years old or something. Yeah.
We had a great pitching staff. Seaver, Kuzman, and Ryan never hurt their arms. They had strong legs, they had great conditioning methods, and they worked hard, and they kept themselves in great shape. They never hurt themselves. They didn't have all these injuries. You know, the only guy that hurt himself, and it wouldn't be nothing today, was Gary Gentry. He had bone chips. Back, you know, in the 60s, they didn't know how to go in there and scope out those arms like they do now. And of course, we didn't have long-term contracts. Even a guy like Sandy Koufax, he had to retire because he couldn't take any more cortisone shots because he had, you know, problems with his arm. He was in his early 30s.
He was 30. He was 30 when he retired.
Right, okay. So today they would have said...
And he only won 27 games.
Right. Now today they would say, okay, we're going in, taking a look at your arm, do whatever you have to do, sit out a half a season, and you'd be back, and he would have pitched another 5 years. He was great, but he couldn't do it anymore. They had 1-year contracts. That was it.
Yeah.
I mean, adios. Don't let the door hit you in the butt.
Well, do we have any questions? Open it up. Yeah, back there.
Like, from your perspective, in 1969, was it ever, like, say in, like, August, like, you guys are playing fantastic, and you're going into a city, and you know you're a great team. Was that, like, surreal for you, considering, like, how your career started out and the teams you were on?
Well, the thing about me, I started with the Mets. We were eliminated at the All-Star break every year. You know, now we're playing late in the season, and it means something. But we knew we had something that year. We came together in spring training. We had a great manager, great leader. Gil Hodges was a very strict disciplinarian. He was a Marine sergeant. You know, he was out there. You played his way or you hit the highway. But we played good fundamental baseball. We had good pitching. When we went to California on the West Coast trip, we beat all the California teams. We never beat them before. I think we won 10 games in a row out there. Then we came back to New York and played the Cubs, who had a 10-game lead on us. But we swept them in New York. So we beat teams that were contenders. And we swept every series with Chicago. We weren't lucky in '69. We were a good ball club. We beat the Cubs. They didn't beat themselves. We beat them every series. You know, when you split a series, you don't gain any ground. So we had to make up 10 games, so we'd go in and win 4 in a row. So now you pick up 4 games. We went out to Chicago. We beat them 3 in a row. Now, instead of a 10-game lead, they were down to a 3-game lead after 2 series. So they were looking over their shoulder like, you know, Leo DeRocha was saying, look, you know, looking back. But we knew we were playing good baseball, and we played great. The second half of the year, we won 60 games. Then we won the playoff against Atlanta, who had a great hitting team. They had 5 guys. They had 40 home runs that year. And our pitching faltered, but our hitting came on. So we were a team concept, and that's really the way to win. You can't win with one player. The pitchers will pitch around those guys. You need guys in a row that can contribute, and we had everyone that was able to play. And Gil made you play his way. If you were a platoon player and he wanted to platoon, he didn't pull any tricks on you. If you know you were playing against left-handers and a left-hander was pitching tomorrow, you played. A right-hander was pitching, he didn't sneak you in the lineup and try to trick you. He wanted his best players. So mentally you prepared yourself. Physically you got ready for the ball games. And we played as a team, and everybody contributed that year. And we would have won a couple more pennants if Gil doesn't pass away the following year. He dies in spring training, and, you know, that was the end for us, really. We had no leader. We were a good ball club without a leader, and he really made a big difference. Most of the time, a manager can't win that many ball games for you during the course of the year. The best team's going to win. But in the close games, that's when the manager can affect the difference in the ball club.
And I don't remember. I know Yogi was there, 73. Who took over after Hodges? I forgot.
No, it was Yogi.
It was Yogi.
Yogi took over. Yogi was a great guy. A great guy. But you know what? Some guys are leaders and some guys are not. Yogi was one of the guys. And you know what? If you had a great team, he's going to win. But you have to have leadership. You know, you can't just let players dictate what's going on. It's like the inmates running the asylum. We had guys coming different times of the ballpark. you know, when it's August and it's 90 degrees out and we're supposed to be on the field at 5:30 and you have some guys in the locker room, well, why am I out in the field? After a while you say, you know what, I'm going to go in the locker room, and nobody's out in the field anymore. And, you know, things go on. After a while it becomes a little ragged, you know, and you can't run it like that.
And yet you won in 73. Of course,
Yeah, but you know what?
were barely at 500.
But what happened?
I mean, you lost the World Series?
Should have won the World Series. When you're beating Oakland 3-2, and you're going out there for 2 games, you're supposed to win. We lost because we pitched the wrong guy in the 6th game.
Who was that?
Seaver pitched. He was not supposed to pitch. George Stone was supposed to pitch. George Stone was 13-3. To this day, I remember that, and everybody on the ball club, that cost us the World Series. Because when you short rest Seaver in October, what's the purpose of it? We didn't have to win the 6th game. They did. He couldn't figure that out. We had to show up on the 6th game. If we lose, so what? We got the 7th. Now you got the best pitcher in baseball going the 7th game, fully rested. Not short rested, because Seaver, remember, threw a lot of strikeouts, a lot of innings. He was out there 9 innings every day from April 1st to October. Now you're coming into the playoffs. Why do I want to short rest him? I got to win 1 game. Go with George Stone. And tell George, you're out here until the sun goes down. And if we lose 40-0, they're using up their staff. We've got 10 pitchers ready for the next game. That's the game we want to win. We could give up on Saturday, but I'm coming back to win the World Series on Sunday. When we lost Saturday, Seaver got knocked out. We should have left for the airport right then. That's how down we were. We lost with our best guy. Now we're coming back.
Who pitched Game 7 for you?
Matlack. You know, and he's not Seaver. You know, John was a good pitcher, but didn't have that temperament that Seaver could come back. I would have rather seen Kuzman come back, but of course, you know, you have a rotation. But Kuzman was a great pitcher.
Yeah.
Good.
Question. The same question for each of you. Just curious if you had a 1-game playoff, the 69 Mets versus the 86 Mets. And if you're Pete Rose, who do you bet on and why?
Who do you bet on?
69 versus 86.
Well, you got Gibbs. What's her name would be pitching? Gooden would be pitching for the Mets. 86 against Bobby Seaver. You know, so you know that might not be any runs scored. You know, Gooden was a great pitcher. I mean, there's no question about it. He had, you know, his first 5 or 6 years was as good as anybody. Unfortunately, he had some physical problems, you know, and his career got away from him. But when he came up, he did things on the mound that nobody else did. But so did Seaver. Seaver was a great competitor. It would have been a tough game. Tough game. You know, we had great defense, too. I don't know. You'd have to wait and see, you know. Nobody knows. It's fantasy baseball, I guess.
Anyone else? Yes.
You mentioned about the season being too long.
Mm-hmm.
Or I don't know if it's true or not. It seems like there's more injuries now. Is it true or?
Well, we don't know why there are injuries. You know, everybody keeps talking about some of the steroid situation. Season's too long. There's no question about it.
That's why there are seasons reporting.
Well, there's injuries, I think, because, you know, if you were on some of those drugs, you have a tendency to build up too much muscle and you pull it apart. That's what they're blaming on a lot of the injuries. But when you play 162 games, physically your body gets worn out. And remember, an off day is not traveling to California. I mean, that's what we would do. We would travel all the time. So physically your body, you hurt yourself when you don't have the proper rest. It doesn't take much to pull a muscle. You know, you pull a muscle and you're out. You could be out for 6 weeks with a hamstring muscle or something. If you pull it bad enough, I mean, you're out. You can't come back. There's nothing you can do about it.
And these guys are playing under pressure.
Oh.
You know, so it's not only just a game. I mean, it is a business, and you're playing to succeed, and you're playing hard.
Playing to win, you know. I will say one thing. In the era when I played, guys didn't take as much time off because we didn't have long-term contracts. So you played through injuries. Now guys with their managers and stuff like that, they don't play because they've got 5-year contracts. You know, they don't have to get back on the field. We knew if a young kid came up and did well for 2 weeks, we might not get back in the lineup because the difference in our salaries didn't mean anything. You tell me when A-Rod comes back in 2 months, 3 months, whatever he's coming back. A young kid that's playing third base is going to play. They owe him $30 million a year. You know he's going in the lineup, so there's no pressure to get back in the lineup. We had pressure to go there. That was what really pressure, going every day to the ballpark. And when you had a slump, you knew it was going to affect you. You were going to be gone the next year. They would replace you in a hurry. They didn't say, we'll keep you around for 4 or 5 years. Maybe you'll come out of that slump. You know, you got another profession.
People would say that, well, the players aren't loyal. They move around and all that stuff. Well, the owners weren't very loyal either.
No, you know what? It's a business. I think the players control the market today. The owners can't control themselves. They're overpaid. And that's their problem. Nobody tells them to bid whatever salaries the players are getting. They deserve it. The owners paid it. There could be free agency every year. And if you use fiscal restraint and you have a payroll and you can't afford A-Rod, don't pay him $30 million. I could pay him $10 million, $5 million. And if he doesn't want it, I guess he can't play for my ball club. So the owners created their own problem, and then they complain they're overpaid. Well, who told them to bid on those guys? Look at the guy out in the Angels.
Yeah.
They got a big problem. They got 2 guys not hitting now.
Pujols and
Hamilton.
Hamilton.
I mean, they're both getting $25, $30 million. The Mets were sold for $20 million when I retired. That ball franchise was sold. The whole franchise was sold for $20 million. Now they have players making more.
But, you know, Ed, even though these owners are paying these players so much money, every time that an owner goes to a game, he goes there in his limousine.
Oh, no, he's making money, but he's entitled to make money. As a player, I never begrudge an owner for making money because, you know what, without him, can't pay my salary. So, you know, you can't count the other guy's money. And look, in my business also, if someone comes in, I don't count their money, don't count my money. You shouldn't. If you're happy and you want to play, sign your contract. And don't try to renegotiate. And I don't believe in that. If I was in the front office and a guy wants to renegotiate, I'd throw him out. He signed a long-term contract. You signed it in good faith. Play it out. And that created the problem with Seaver. Tom Seaver, that got him traded because the Mets had 7 guys that signed 3-year contracts, including myself. And Tom went to spring training after Messerschmidt beat the reserve clause and said, you know, I'm the best pitcher in baseball and Messerschmidt's making more money. He signed a 3-year contract and he wanted to renegotiate in spring training. And Grant said, you know what? You signed a 3-year contract. There were 6 guys sitting outside the room waiting for him to come out with a new contract. We were all going to go back in there. So he said, wait till the season and we'll negotiate at that point. And then a lot of things happened. Things were said in the papers with Dick Young, et cetera, and it got out of hand and it forced a trade with Tom Seaver. But that was timing. He signed the first time ever a 3-year contract, but so did the other 6 of us.
So you were waiting outside the door.
In spring training, we all were. We knew what Tom was doing. Tom was trying, and you know what? He deserved to be the highest paid pitcher in baseball. No question about it. But you know what? You had a contract.
Yeah.
All of us, we all had bad timing. We were all dumb. We signed 3
you weren't
years.
dumb. It was just a matter of the timing.
Bad
which
timing.
Marvin
And
Miller was able to change
timing
all
is
that stuff.
everything in life. You know what I mean? And we signed a 3-year contract, and I was stuck with it 3 years at $108,000 and couldn't get a new contract.
Of course, when you signed it, you were happy about it.
Very happy.
Yeah.
You know, first time we ever had a 3-year contract. It beats going, and it makes it easier to play. Knowing you got a contract for 2 more years, you know, you don't have to worry about a strike.
So you could have 2 bad years, but then work hard on your 3rd year.
Well, you know, that's the concept. I think sometimes it works. I don't know.
Anything else? Okay. All right. Well.
Maybe they have Yankee fans here. They're Yankee fans. That's good. I was a Yankee fan. Doesn't matter to me. No, Pepe is a friend of mine, but I was a Yankee fan until I signed in June of '62. I love the Yankees.
Let me make a confession. Some people who've read me know, but I was born and raised in Chicago. So it turns out that I'm a Cub fan. I mean, you grow up as a Cub fan.
I feel sorry for you.
Well, but did you feel sorry for the Cubs in '69?
The only guy I felt sorry for was Ernie Banks.
Yeah.
A real gentleman, a sweetheart. and some of the guys were yelling out, "Let's play two," because that was one of his slogans. You
Yeah.
know, let's play two today. We beat him the last day of the year in '73, and the second game didn't mean anything. We said, "Let's play two, Ernie." You know, but he was a great
But
guy. I wish he would've
Billy
got
Williams is a good guy,
Billy,
too.
no, they were
Yeah.
all good guys. Billy,
Yeah.
Fergie Jenkins was a great guy also,
Yeah.
you know. But I'm just saying, Ernie was the one guy who played a long career, never got into the postseason.
Yeah.
And some players, unfortunately, don't, and other players are in the right position all the time.
So now the Cubs are going into this is the 105th season in which they have not won a World Series.
And you're still a Cub fan.
I'm magnetized to the box score. I don't know why, you know.
I love
And then the
Chicago.
standings.
Chicago I love. I'll tell you what, it's a great
It's a great
town.
city, isn't it?
Great town to go to, great restaurants. The town is great. I used to love to go there because it's day baseball.
Yeah,
Of course, it's not anymore. They put lights on it.
yeah.
But I would have loved to have gotten traded to Chicago
Uh-huh.
because I played well there. I was a day person. To this day, I get up early in the
Well,
morning.
then you had Rush Street at night.
Yeah, but it didn't bother me. I still was able to get up in the morning and function. You know what I mean? You could really do that. I mean, some guys don't play well in the daytime. I played well during the daytime. I could see the ball better. And to this day, I'm looking for a job. Anybody has a job for me between like 6:15 in the morning and 8. If you could figure out a way I can make
Well,
some
Morning
money.
Joe.
Something I can do. I was going to deliver the newspapers, I think. You know, the
Yeah.
girl comes to my house about 6:30.
My mother was a Brooklyn Dodger fan, so of course she became a Met fan in the family when they were on the Yankees. But she took us to the game at Shea Stadium when we went out in front of the Cubs for the first time in 1969. Do you remember that game? Because that is such a vivid memory for me. Somebody let a black cat out on the field
Yeah.
on the Cubs side, and everybody took their socks off and handkerchiefs, and everybody sang "Goodnight Leo," and we were all kids.
We did. The cat ran around the on-deck circle.
Yeah.
But there were a lot of cats. I just will tell you this, because they had rats out there. Under the ballpark there, you know, the people would throw the garbage, you know, down the seats, and it went underneath the stadium. There were a lot of rats down there, so they had plenty of cats. The cat happened to come on the field, though. That was the only thing.
Well, the Cubs won the first game of the season against Pittsburgh. So they were 1-0 and they were in first place. I told my wife, who's sitting back there, I said we should frame this standings today.
That's what you got to do.
So now they've plummeted.
You know, I don't know. They had the best 8 players during, you know, the 60s. You know, and it takes a manager. Leo DeRocha would wear his guys out, where other managers would platoon a little bit and move guys in and out. You can't let a player sit on the bench for 2 months and then put him in for a game or two and say he's going to get some base hits. He's of no value to you. Batting practice doesn't help. You got to play guys sporadically just to keep them sharp. And your pinch hitter, you got to put in there once in a while to get 4 at-bats so he gets a chance to see some pitching. Otherwise, you can't do it. At the end of my career, I told Joe Torre, we were at such a bad ball club, he wanted me to pinch hit for him. I said, Joe, I'm going to hit once a month. We weren't in any ball games. You know, I said, you can't save me for a key situation. I said, I got to get some at-bats, otherwise it can't help you when you really need me. You know, so you got to play once in a while.
Okay, I think, and we have some,
Okay.
you have some books to, well, if you people want to come over and buy a book.
Get Ira's book. It's one of the best sellers.
And there's a very good column in it on Ed Kranepool.
There is an article in there, and I read it too. Actually, I did. It wasn't bad.